Welcome back to the show, guys. I am Samikis Matthews. I am your Mocktor, not your doctor. No credentials, no degree, just 53 years of life experience and a PhD in keeping it real. So let's get into it. Today we are going to talk about, I'm going to be looking at my spreadsheet. I have to take notes, guys, because if you haven't noticed, I digress. I lose my thought. I'm getting better at this, I hope. Maybe not, but I'm a better writer than I am a speaker. But, I see a lot of channels on mothers and daughters-in-law, but usually it's the daughters-in-law has, a channel or a page or, an Instagram account, and then the daughters-in-law, and it's, you either have, there's a terrible mother-in-law page or there's a difficult daughter-in-law page. And today, TheMocktor will be diagnosing both. So let's get into that. I want to say this up front. Most mothers-in-law are not villains, and most daughters-in-law are not trying to steal anyone's son. I think what's happening is there's a, I hope you don't hear my husband in the background because he's watching this show and it's so loud, and these things are supposed to be kind of noise canceling. So I don't know. I'm still going to upload this video even if there's noise in the background. Just, I'm apologizing in advance if there is. I don't know how to, I still have to look for a good editing tool that I want to use anyway. So I think what's happening is that the mother and the son have been together for so many years as mother and son. That is her child, and that is, and they grow up in, when a child grows up in the same house with their parent, they think alike because the son thinks just like his parent because the parent raised him to think how he thinks. So they see things the same way. They do things the same way. And so they understand each other perfectly because they've spent decades, 2 decades in the home together. And sometimes if there's a disagreement in the relationship between the husband and the wife, or between the mother and the daughter, or not even a disagreement, but just a way of seeing things, the son will tend to agree with his mother, not because he doesn't trust his wife, it's just they see things the same way. And I can see how that can be quite irritating for a wife, because I just changed, that thing was giving me a headache. She is, frustrated because she has this point of view, and I could see the son going, but isn't that the right way to do it? Or isn't that the right way to think about this or that? Because the mother and the son she raised him. So they see each other exactly the same way. I just see, but it's a frustrating because a thing, you've got two women that love the same man, and, there's no rule book on this stuff. There really should be. Maybe I'll write one because I think it would make it easier for all of us. But I'll be honest, I've been both. I've been a daughter-in-law and I've been a mother-in-law. And, with my mother-in-law, she... I always just respected her. Whatever, she didn't like me. She wasn't kind to me, but it didn't make me, curl up in a ball somewhere and cry. I just was like, okay, it's fine. I was always very respectful to her. I was always, I didn't argue with her. I just, if my husband wanted to go visit her, we went and visited her, and, She would say very little to me, but I always gave her a hug and a kiss. It's also a cultural thing, and it's also the fact that I feel very secure about myself. I wasn't going to let her make me feel bad about myself. I just didn't. I just didn't feel bad about myself. But, and then I've been a mother-in-law, and, I see both sides of the coin. I do. I see that these two women, they love the same man, but and I think the daughter-in-law, coming kind of, she's the newer person in the relationship because the husband, the son and the mom have been together for all these years, so she's kind of newer to the relationship, and she's trying to assert her kind of like not value her like pecking order or something. She's trying to assert herself, and she's trying to, this is my husband, this is my spouse, and she wants to let him and both of them know that she's a very important part of this now. And even though the mother-in-law 9 times out of 10 isn't trying to take that role, it's just something that happens because we're, any daughter-in-law who has a child and she grows up, she's raising a child that's going to be just like her too. And it's just the way it is. They grow up in the same house, and that's just the way it is. But for a mother, it's not just so much about the relationship either. It's about changing your role. And the husband, the son too, I think when you first move out of the house, they're so used to depending on you, so they'll call you about things, and they're used to doing that. They're programmed to do that. They've been doing that their whole life, right? And the mother with the son is gonna be like, oh yeah, this is what it is, or this is what I think about that, or whatever, and both the mother and the son have to relearn. You go through it the first time, with it. I have 4 kids. So, you've got the first ones that are the guinea pigs, and then the last 2, they always got it easy because, the first, son and daughter-in-law paved the way, right? But the way that it should be is when the son approaches the mother, the mother has to learn to say, maybe you should ask your wife, or the son, but we don't, but it takes time to get out of that habit of just running to your mom and asking the question, because you're just used to doing it, it's not like you're a mama's boy or whatever. It's just something as a family, you're just used to doing that your kids are going to call you when they grow up and they're going to ask you questions. So the roles change. And, at first it's like, oh yeah, do this, da-da-da-da-da. And then, the daughter or the son does it. And then the spouse says, well, how come you didn't ask me? And that's a valid question. It's a valid question. But even, I can say that now, but it's like, at first it's like, well, what do you mean? Well, why did he ask me? I mean, that's, or why did she ask me? I'm their parent, So the roles change, and it's just something, it's a learning experience. And I think if everyone involved can just understand, look, we're all doing this for the first time. Let's just go easy on each other because we're all doing this for the first time, and it takes time to change decades of behavior and, patterns. So, but it's different. So, yeah, you raised him, and I wrote this. I'm going to read you what I wrote. You raised him and protected him for years. You worried about him for years. Suddenly you're expected to step back and quietly pretend that doesn't hurt. Oh, it hurts. It does hurt. Yeah. It hurts. Yeah. And that hurt sometimes comes out as opinion, unsolicited advice, because you're experiencing that for the first time. I look forward to a time when I can help my daughters-in-law and my son-in-law to go through this part of, transitioning. My grandkids are growing up so fast. I mean, I got one that's going to be 13 in March, and it's like, what is going on? And it's going to come. If you think 13 years went by fast, 5's going to go by twice or 3 times as fast. And this is going to be something that they're going to have to learn, And I hope to be the kind of mother-in-law to them that helps them through this and not go, see, how does it feel? Although, some people probably could feel that way, right? But we all go through it, right? Cycles of life. We right now, I am at where my mother was several years ago, and where she's at now, I'll be there in a few years ago. I mean, it's just the cycle. It's just the way that it is. So that all hurts. Yeah. And sometimes that pain doesn't always look like pain. It looks like you're being difficult, but we're not. We're going through pain. It's very hard to transition. Any kind of changing of yourself, changing of your habit. There's a process period. There's a hard period. There's a, you're paving the way. It's like you're making a road on a totally rural place that's never been, walked before, and it's rocky and it's got thorns and coyotes and all this stuff, and you got to clear all that stuff out so you can make the road. But it's some work, And from the daughter-in-law's side, she's walking into a family system that already existed. I'm writing this down too, long before she showed up. So that can be kind of, that can make a person feel insecure. And, she's trying to create, build her marriage and create her own house and, and still be respectful to someone who might not trust her yet. That's all very hard. I gotta be honest with you. I gotta admit something. I remember when my daughter-in-law was a new wife and a new mother, and I remember her not knowing how to do a lot of things. And my son worked, and then he came home and he, helped, around the house like a man should, But I remembered like there was just a lot of things that she just didn't know how to do yet. She still needed to learn to do because she was brand new. Like I said, we all got to learn, and there's growing pains. And I kind of got hard on her about something that even I remember myself that I had a hard time learning, or, it wasn't anything specific. It was just, I caught myself going, oh, how could you, I was like, you had a hard time with that too, Who do you think you are, But that's me. I'm the kind of person that I do look at myself, and I kind of felt bad about it. But, and I wasn't critical of her. It's just an observation that I made. But I guess, a comment can feel like criticism, or a suggestion can feel like, judgment. And it's like, even if you suggest something, it can, when a person's still making their way in coming into the new family, a suggestion can feel like you're judging them, but you're not, you're not really judging them. So I don't know, maybe I am a judgmental person. I gotta think about that. I really try not to be. And if I am, most of the time I'll sit back and I'll go, yeah, but why are they doing that? Or why are they doing this, And you got to tell yourself, every time you suggest something, she gets her feelings hurt. That's not oversensitivity. That's pressure. There's pressure to a young person being a mom for the first time. It's like after a while you get the hang of it, but when you first become a mom, you could have 4 kids and look back to the time you had one and go, oh my gosh, that was so easy. But when you're first a mom or when you're first a wife, it takes time to get to know the ropes. So, and let's not forget to talk about the son. Yeah. So I'm going to read what I wrote. It says, the man in the middle. Oh, man, this is hard on him too. This really is hard. I wrote something. Actually, I'm going to read it to you. Hold on a second. I got to pause. Okay. It says, he loves them both, his wife, his present, his mother, his history. By explaining one love, threatens the other, so he becomes careful, he edits himself, he carries truth quietly. He learns to protect his marriage and how to silently understand his mother. Can I read my own? He becomes strong in ways that look like calm and lonely in ways no one sees. He becomes a man. He understands that he must protect the women he loves. Yeah. I love you, son. That's what I wrote after that. It's hard on them. They got to be so careful about everything that they say to not hurt this one and not hurt that one. And let me tell you, mothers, because he's got to live with her, sometimes he's got to put you in your place and say, even though he understands everything, he knows, he's got to live and maintain peace in his home for his children. And you've got to let him, because those are your grandkids. You don't want to be the cause for fighting in the house when there's kids. We got to be careful. So, he loves his mother. He chose his wife, and I love my son and daughters-in-law, all 3 of them. I really, really, really do. But I think it's really hard for women because we're emotional, We love our baby. How can you expect me to, and then she's like, and I love him, and how can you expect, it's just, you just got to try to understand each other, He doesn't want to disappoint anybody, and he may shut down or avoid or say nothing, because saying the wrong thing is worse than saying nothing at all, And the Mocktor's diagnosis for that is that's not weakness, that's emotional overload. That's what I wrote there. It's emotional overload, It's hard on our kids, when there's a brand new, everybody's trying to figure out their role, So yeah. When he's constantly put in the middle, it doesn't bring anyone closer. It just builds quiet resentment. Oh, man, and we don't want that to go wrong. We don't want that for our kids, either of them. So, yeah. So there's got to be boundaries, guys, Unfortunately, we don't have just the access to our kids that we used to have, I just did a video on that. Boundaries aren't punishment, They're instructions for how to stay connected without resentment. Sometimes our kids, they have to put boundaries up, not because they want to be away from us, but they have to respect the spouse that they love, And when they come around us, they enjoy the time and that's wonderful. And sometimes women, I know how it is, especially Latina mamas, woo, yeah. Latina keyword, that's the key focus word there. We are serious about our mijos, about our sons. We are serious, you know. And yeah, and we can't make our boys feel like, hey, I'm your mother and you better. That's not emotional maturity. We got to understand, we have to really, really, for them, unselfishly for them, we have to respect the boundaries, show our daughters-in-law, and keep convincing her that you love her. You know, keep convincing her, keep trying, you know, and you know, it's hard to believe, you know, sometimes for a daughter-in-law, you know, but as a mother-in-law, when you look at the way your daughter-in-law is with her, and I only have one daughter-in-law with children. When I look at her with my grandkids, it's like, oh my gosh, she's such a wonderful mother. Look for the good things that you see in her, you know, look for the good things. Don't dwell on, we don't do it like that. You know, don't dwell on that. Don't focus on what she's not doing, you know, because everybody's got something good. You know, my son wouldn't have picked her if she wasn't good. I could tell you that right now. I mean, I'm his mama, my son, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, we have to be really, really gentle. And like I said, the next daughter-in-law, she had it kind of easy because, you know, the first daughter-in-law paved the way. So it's all good and everything's wonderful. You know, I'm reaching back on some of my experiences in life. I just hurt my toe. I am, but you know, we have got to. You know, I see these. You know, Instagram things, and I'm like, wow. I hope the son doesn't know that that's his mother that has that page, and they don't find out, because all this stuff she's saying, you know, but I understand too, there are some daughters-in-law though who, you know, take it too far, and there are some mothers-in-law who take it too far. I don't want to take that away from anybody if you're going through that, you know. But when you have two emotionally mature people and you both want to make it good for the kids, you know, the man in the middle, the son/husband, you know, you make it work. You know, you make it work. And I have a wonderful son-in-law, you know, but I got on his nerves too, I'm sure, you know. And men are a little less emotional though, so, you know, it's kind of easier when you've got you know, a son-in-law too. He's, you know, he doesn't care that my daughter and I are, you know, super close and all that kind of stuff, and all in each other's business and stuff. But anyway, so yeah, guys, tell me what you think. I mean, I don't want to, you know, gosh, you know, this is something you're always going to see from me. I am one of those people who I want to look on both sides, and I've said this before in my videos. Just because it's, you know, I'm the mother-in-law in the situation, and my daughters-in-law and my son-in-law, I'm not going to say I'm always right. I'm always going to look at both sides. I don't pick a side of a person. I always pick the side of what's right to the best that I can. I like to see both sides, both angles, because everybody's not always all wrong. Sometimes, I mean, you do. I mean, you got some nuts out there, that's true, and you got people who really do like to cause conflict. They're, you know, a lot of times they're narcissistic, and they always want to be causing drama and stuff, and gossiping and saying stuff, and, you know, there's that. I do know that exists, but with emotionally mature people, these kind of things can be overcome, and family dynamics can stay intact, you know, when we're being mature, you know. So I do not write prescriptions, not real prescriptions, but I am going to give you some medication to take. And that medication today, guys, is going to be, if you've got a daughter or son-in-law and, you know, the relationships are strained, you know, try to look inward at what you can do better. Make them secure with the fact that, you know, you really do want the best for your son and his wife, or your daughter and her husband. And work at trying to see things through their lens. Okay? So, again, it's your medicine and it's what the doctor ordered. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Again, I'm not a real doctor. I'm a Mocktor. Okay? So this is just for fun and to talk it out, get better at all this stuff, this relationship stuff. Woo! There's, you know, it's a lot of, we ask a lot of ourselves when we want to do good, and we should. We should expect a lot of ourselves. We should always try to be better. So tell me what you think, guys. What are your experiences? And I hope I didn't step on anybody's toes or hurt anybody's feelings out there, you know. But like, comment, and subscribe. And subscribe. That's such a... Like, comment, and subscribe. And leave your comments and let me know. And you guys have a wonderful day. See you at your next appointment.